Ready? Play.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever time it is in the world, wherever you are tuning in from. Vanch is on the west coast of the US. So for you, it is 2 p.m. Am I right? Just past 2 o'clock?
Yep, just past 2 and 2 hours until day 2 starts.
There we go. It's very confusing as I'm talking to you on the west coast of the US and I'm talking to Eddie in Hong Kong, and the tennis is happening in Australia. Meanwhile, most of us, or many of us, I should say, are in Europe. Let's get to it. This is a semi-spontaneous idea I just had, especially as I know Vanch has a show along with Damien called the Iga and Carlos show. It is Iga first, then Carlos second in the title. Is that right?
Yep.
Was there a particular reason?
Iga and Carlos tennis show. Yep.
Yeah. Was there a reason for that, Vanch, putting Iga first, or?
It just sounded better, you know.
Fair enough. All right, let's get to it. What I want to do basically is just plot Iga Swiatek's possible path to Australian Open glory, as you can see in the title. That doesn't necessarily mean that Vanch and I have her winning the tournament. In fact, I have no problem with, spoilers alert, I actually don't have her winning the tournament. Do you have her winning the tournament?
I don't either. I don't have her winning it.
Exactly. But if she was to win the tournament, or certainly get to the final, this is the path that Vanch and I sort of both have an idea on. It'll be pretty quick paced, so we'll get to it. First of all, of course, she's playing Siniakova in the first round. Do you envisage any problems for her in this particular match, Vanch?
I think this is one of those matches that is good for Iga in the sense that I don't think she'll get hit off the court, where, right off the return or serve or anything like that, and so she can work her way more into rallies. We might see a few more little bit of rust at the end, maybe getting used to the courts. Like I remember first round of the US Open, for instance, was a little bit tricky for her, just getting used to the conditions. Or a couple of years ago in the first round, she was really pushed. So I could see it being, a set or two could be competitive, but like not in the sense that makes you, doubt her chances to go deep, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. I'd be surprised if she dropped a set. Siniakova is not in amazing singles form, at least, and I don't think she's got the game to trouble Iga. So you and I are in agreement there. We'll see now where you and I, maybe our paths disappear or go in different directions in terms of her possible opponents, and then they may realign later on. Who do you have her playing in round 2 between Slamkova and Volinets?
Volinets is tricky in the sense she gets a lot of balls back. She defends well. She's a good counterpuncher, but I think Slamkova has bigger weapons, and of course she finished last year pretty strong. I mean, Beijing King Cup, before that she was winning 250s. So I went with her.
Did you?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I went with Slamkova, but I'm not, it could be either. That's like more of a 60-40, I think.
I went with Volinets, but I think with which, again, whoever Iga ends up playing, I don't think she'll have too many problems in getting to the third round. Very different, of course, to last year, Vanch. If you remember her opening matches against Kenin, which kind of got forgotten about because of what happened against Daniel Collins, and then obviously ultimately against Noskova. But she had a really tough opening couple of rounds last year, but I don't see it happening this year. Do you?
No, this is by far much more comfortable than last year. Like that gauntlet that you mentioned, those 3 opponents back to back was as tough as it could get, really.
Possible third round opponents. Now, it does get a little trickier here. Alexandrova, Raducanu, Kale, and Anisimova. Which of those 4 do you have her meeting in the third round?
It's a tough section because I think this is where you get the most differing opinions. Some people will go with Emma, some will go with Alexandrova. And Alexandrova has caused Iga some problems. In Miami last year, for instance, she played a really, really good match, beating her there. She's a super flat ball striker, really the kind of opponent that Iga would struggle against. But at the same time, I think Anisimova does really well down under. She's won a title. She's made a couple of second weeks. She beat Osaka, for instance, 2 years ago when Osaka was in much better form. Or actually, that was 3 years ago now, 2022. And then she made the 4th round last year, and she, didn't have much tennis coming in. And I think I have her in the 3rd round. I think Anisimova will get there.
Yeah, me too. So you and I are realigning here. It was difficult with Alexandrova. By the way, that's a really tough opening round as well for Emma Raducanu, and I think she would find it particularly tough to get to round 3 because after Alexandrova, I would have her playing Anisimova. But that's a tasty second round, by the way. We won't dwell on that very much, really. But Alexandrova against Anisimova would be very exciting to then see who ends up playing Iga. I'll tell you one thing that will work. I have Anisimova too, by the way, but I think something that should work in their favor is they will be pretty battle hardened probably by the time they get to Iga. Iga, by the way, we don't know, but she may have done and dusted her two early round matches in just over 2 hours, for example. Meanwhile, I often think that at the beginning of a tournament, some of these tough matches can work in your favor. Once you get into that second week, you don't want to have had too many 3-hour battles. But at this stage, shouldn't be too much of a problem for any of these players. But yeah, I have Anisimova playing Iga as well. So what are your thoughts on that potential match?
So that match, I could see it being pretty tough. I could see it being kind of like the Katie Boulter match in the United Cup, where like that's the type of opponent where like the red lining ability, the ball striking, especially Anisimova's backhand down the line. Her backhand is definitely one of the best on the tour. But in terms of movement, I think Iga should feel pretty comfortable if she's able to extend rallies, and I could see that one being like, okay, she might have to work out some problems. She might have to, that's where maybe the stuff with Memphis said. We'll see if some of the things that they've been working on with their varied baseline game and like higher loopier shots before pulling the trigger, and like the more patient point construction that we've been talking about, as well as a little bit more variation. Like I think that's where we'll see it tested the most. But ultimately, I still have Iga coming through it, and I had it when I did my bracket as well.
Cool. Who do you think, if you were hoping for Iga to get to the fourth round, who would you rather have her face in terms of which one do you think might be the more difficult or easier opponent between Anisimova and Alexandrova? As you mentioned, Alexandrova beat her in Miami last year. So,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe Anisimova might be the more favorable one of the two.
I think so. I think Alexandrova is, the upset potential is maybe greater actually than Anisimova.
All right. Who do you have Iga playing potentially in the fourth round?
So in the fourth round, there's some options like this Kalinskaya, who made the quarters here last year, and if she's on her game, she could definitely do it again with the draw that she has. But I actually went with Azarenka. Azarenka is, I think this is her most consistent slam. Obviously, she won it twice, and it's not the same Azarenka that was in her prime, of course, but she's still very capable, and she's always at a 15 to 25 in the ranking sort of level the last 3 years in a row. And I feel like Kalinskaya might be a little bit more vulnerable. She's usually more injury prone. She plays Burrell in the first round, who's qualified and had a lot of good match wins in Brisbane. She knocked off Navarro there, so I could see Kalinskaya losing early, and then I could see Azarenka getting to the fourth round. So I went with Vika.
Me too. I have this potential match happening too, and again, I just feel as though this is not too bad for Iga. Really, probably the one of all the players that we've mentioned so far, the one you'd probably be seeking an early departure for if you want her to have a more comfortable path to the quarters would be Alexandrova. I think that this particular matchup, I'm not sure what the head-to-head is. Do you know between Azarenka and Swiatek?
Yeah, I think it's like 3-1, but the one time that Azarenka won was in 2020 at the US Open, so that was even before the Roland Garros triumph for Iga.
Right. So the new Iga basically has won all three of their most recent encounters. Yeah, the first one was in 2020, which is to a loss of just 6 games. It'll only be their second one at a Grand Slam, and obviously Victoria is towards the end of her career, so there might not be too many more chances for her. But yeah, I like Azarenka in Australia. That's why I have her getting to this stage. But I'm with you on that. I think that Iga, it's not a bad matchup for her, I think, and therefore she'll be back in the quarterfinals, a stage that she's not been at since 2022. And people will be starting to get a little bit excited, especially if she's reached there without, for example, dropping a set, which I think is possible. It seems to me as though you mentioned the Wim set thing. I thought his comments recently were very interesting about maybe just playing a slightly lighter schedule in the first half. I had Stuttgart in my mind as being a tournament that might just be one that she could just skip, particularly after Miami and the hard courts. And then, I don't think, 2 1000s as a build up for the French Open might be an idea. There might be 1 or 2 others as well. Maybe Canada in that build up to the US Open as well might be a tournament that could fall by the wayside. And if she's picking and choosing her tournaments a bit better. But of course, the other thing is, particularly here down under, he mentioned variety, but also, working a bit more on the hard courts. And obviously Australia is somewhere that, along with Wimbledon, that she's often struggled at and never been beyond the semifinals. And that was a one-off occurrence in 2022. But yeah, are you excited to see how she deals with this tournament this year round?
Yeah, I think I'm encouraged by the United Cup because she played so many tough matches and tough opponents and got really battle hardened. At the same time, you hope that she didn't expend too much energy, especially the way it ended with a little bit of, I don't know if it's really an injury, but more just like physical fatigue and niggle at the very end, the medical timeout that she took against Coco. But I think that's just she's been so battle hardened really since Billie Jean King Cup, and she's come through most of the matches. And the Coco match, even though she lost, it was pretty high quality for the most part. So I feel better about her chances than I did last year. I think minimum she should get to the semifinals here. I think anything less than a semi with this draw would be disappointing for Iga.
Who do you have her playing in the quarterfinals?
This one I went really back and forth on. It's mostly because of the Navarro Stearns match. Like I think the winner of that one, could pull through. I don't have a lot of faith in Kazakina at the majors. She tends to do well in like certain select 500s, but the deep slam runs have been missing for me. Sakari, I don't feel great about it. I think actually maybe Ons Jabeur is somebody who can take advantage of it because she did have some encouraging form in the two lead up tournaments. She played a really tight match against Andreeva. She beat Alexandrova. She beat she's already beaten some players that she was really struggling against last year, like 3 wins in a row, I think, before getting to the quarters. So I went with her, but I'm not too confident about it. Like if Navarro gets through Stearns, I think she can get to the quarters. But if Stearns takes out Navarro, for instance, then I could see Jabeur taking advantage.
So who have you got finally in that quarterfinal against Iga?
I'm gonna go with Ons.
Okay, I've gone Emma Navarro, but that's you're right. It's a three-way fight. I went with Navarro partly because I know that her form is mixed. Let's say at the moment.
Yeah.
And
since the US Open, she hasn't done as well, right?
Right.
That's what made it buzz.
I know her. It's unusual for her because actually I think she's a pretty consistent player. As you can see across the bottom of my screen, I've got her world end number 7, which I'm having a few doubts about after the last few weeks and even the last few months, actually. But yeah, and perhaps that also affected, and Gil, by the way, had her exactly the same spot, Gil Gross. But yeah, I have gone with Emma Navarro, but you're right, 3-way fight. Interestingly, Ons Jabeur is also the pick of Nick for that quarterfinal. I'm just not sure that Ons is quite ready. I know that she's starting to play tennis, starting to play good tennis. In fact, for me, she exceeded my expectations in recent weeks so far. But I've gone for Navarro. But as you say, 3-way fight, and it could all be up in smoke after that Peyton Stearns match. Semi-final, Vanch. Who have you got Iga potentially playing there?
Let's see. So for the semis,
I know who I have.
I actually I went with Madison Keys.
Ooh.
I know it's a little bit, it's a little bit like I got reeled back in, I think, the week before Slam again, and this happens quite a lot with Keys, where she do really well the week before. Like she wins Eastbourne in 2023, and then she actually made the quarters that year and played Sabalenka pretty tight in the quarters. And she won, I think she won a 500 the week before Roland Garros last year, and then she loses to Navarro in the third round. There've been many examples where she's done really well the week or two before, but she's a pretty consistent performer in the majors. So she made the semis here, I think, 3 years ago. And then Rybakina's situation right now with the whole coaching thing makes me kind of wonder where exactly her head is at, even though her draw is really kind. Like, if you were to ask me who's more likely to get to the 4th round between Rybakina and Keys, I would 100% say Rybakina. But I just have that little bit of doubt, like with the whole Goran situation, and just it's more like the noise around Rybakina rather than her tennis. Yeah. So that's why I decided to pull the trigger and went with Keys. And I was very encouraged, even though she was hurt in that final against Pegula, the way she came back and won that 3rd set. And she has shown me a little bit more variety in the last 1 year in terms of her game. Like, this is a game that's stood up throughout the years.
I'd love to know what the likelihood or the stats are behind playing a tournament and then winning it, or even just getting to the final the week before, as in Madison Keys has chosen that path. She chose the same path, by the way, in Strasbourg last year.
Yeah, Strasbourg. That's right.
And I think that it's an interesting path that certain players like and certain players. I mean, it depends on your moment. I know Novak did it when he needed to play some tennis. I think he got to the final, I think in maybe 2021, was it? Maybe, or even he won a tournament.
Yeah, he won Belgrade, the second one, and then he went on to win the French. And
exactly.
It's been done at Roland Garros on the men's side many times with Stan Wawrinka wins Geneva, then he gets to the final, or Ruud wins Geneva, then he gets to the final.
Yeah. So yes, it's not a big deal, and I think you can be encouraged by Madison's performance. I have gone for Rybakina, and I totally understand your reasoning, because it seems to me as there does seem to be a little bit of self-destruct sometimes from her in terms of what's going on around her and some of the things that she's deciding, and possibly a lot of it isn't her fault. There's a lot of obviously things going on, but I won't dwell on too much now. I've spoken about it plenty of times before, as I'm sure many of us have. But I agree with you. It's just, as you say, the draw. means that's why. And I think everything's there for Rebecca to win an Australian Open title. I think the conditions are pretty good for her. I do think that she hasn't progressed in the last 2 years since she made that final in 2023 in the same
that
way.
was another reason actually as well that she hasn't made a slam final since making it here and just won Wimbledon semi and the rest of her other slam results. Okay, some of it is not really her tennis related, but still like she hasn't progressed the same way that I thought she would. I thought she would have 2 slams at least by now.
Fair enough. All right. Who do you have, Iga? Do you have Iga in your final, actually?
Yeah, I actually do. But I don't have her winning it. But I have her in the final.
Against?
I have her against Coco. But I kept going back and forth between Coco and Arena. Like I was really torn on it. And I think the winner of that is my pick for the tournament.
Okay.
And they were the 2 favorites coming in. Obviously, you have to put Sabalenka as the favorite just because of her record in Australia. And the fact she's only lost like 1 set the last 2 years. And she's won Brisbane again. And she won Adelaide 2 years ago. And like form, track record, everything. And I think she's got the easiest paths to the semis because even though she has Andreeva and she has Shang, these are opponents that she's been like cleaning up more or less the last year or so. So I'm pretty confident in her getting to the semis. And then Coco's just like the form that I've seen since the US Open and the technical changes. And you combine that with just how much she frustrates Arena with her, court coverage and defense and just so many errors that she can extract from Arena and kind of make her implode in certain ways. So, and I kind of saw their match last year, a year ago, and I was like, wow, if, Coco back then was pushing Arena this much and she's improved so much in the last 1 year, or at least in the last 3 or 4 months, more or less, then I think I could see that being tough for her. Also going for 3 Australian Opens is like really, really hard. Only 5 women in the Open era have actually done it.
Okay.
And it's not been since Hingis. So no one this century has actually done it. And so if she pulls it off, it would be an amazing feat. But I think she might also feel the pressure because I think number 1 is also on the line for this. So like Iga, if she does 1 round better than Arena, it will be number 1. And then I think for Coco to get to number 1, there's also a chance. So
I have Coco against Arena in the other semi-final, and I have the winner of that particular semi-final beating. If I actually have Iga going out in the semis to Rebecca, actually, for all the reasons that you said. I do know that they just play each other at United Cup, but I do think that the more tennis that Elena plays, the more that she'll be battle hardened and ready for that potential semi-final. I have so many doubts about her as well, but if she could just put those aside, she's an absolutely there. So with a 25% chance of probably winning this tournament with the other 3 main contenders that we've already highlighted.
Yeah, definitely. I also have her just behind Iga in the order of favorites, and I think if she does get to the semis, that's much more dangerous for Iga than Keys. But just the fact that I have Keys, I don't think Keys will make it 1 step further.
Sabalenka, the head-to-head is 8-4. The 3 of the 4 wins, I think, for Arena were on a hard court. Am I right with that? I think hard court it's 3-all.
Yeah, so there's 2 at the WTA finals in 2021 and 2022, and then there's the Cincinnati win last year, which was pretty comfortable for Arena, and then there's the Madrid final of 2023.
Of course, that's the one that's come off the hard court. Yeah, indeed. So, and those conditions are a little more favourable towards Arena, although we know, of course, Iga beat her in that epic final last year. So I actually have a final between Sabalenka and Rybakina, but as I said, I think, to be honest with you, if Iga does make the final, I would also have her losing to both Arena and Coco. I think you've made the point about Coco, and certainly she's turned the tide. I don't think it's going to be quite... I love the comparisons, but I don't think it's going to be quite Yannick Sinner turning the tide or Daniel Medvedev. But now I see Coco and her probably exchanging victories, like rather than just being one-way traffic. And I didn't see that until that purple patch. Well, it's continuing now for Coco, in my opinion. The form that Coco has shown since October until now, for me, is the best tennis of her career. Gil said to me, he gets that, he agrees with me, but he does say, be careful with the sort of end of season sort of form and bringing that into the new year, which I also get. But I saw her going toe to toe with players rather than fighting and battling and defending out of her skin to, overcome opponents such as Arina Sabalenka. I do have Sabalenka winning. And if she was to play Swiatek, so whichever of Coco or Sabalenka wins, I would have her beating Iga in the final. And you've got Coco. Let's finish with that, actually. You've actually got Coco in the final against Iga, but you have gone for Coco. Are they sort of some of the reasons I've highlighted, or is there something else you want to add as well?
Yeah, I think what you say about the rivalry is pretty true in the sense that I don't see like all of a sudden Coco winning like 6 in a row or like Iga was doing, but I see them like more exchanging it, and I see them as more or less 50-50. Right now, I'm just leaning Coco just because of the confidence, and I feel like she can just ride the wave. And I've seen enough from her, mostly United Cup. I mean, WTA Finals was really good that she beat like Pegula, Arena, and Iga like back to back and won it, but the actual tennis was even more convincing at the United Cup, where she just I mean, it's just the offense on her forehand as well, and then just how much she's improved the serve, and she's cleaned up the double faults, because like that was also the main thing. Like she double faulted 20 plus times against Sabalenka and Wuhan, but if she hadn't, I think she would have won that match. So I just feel like I think she just feels so much more confident in herself, and like the thing is, like, we focus so much on what Coco didn't do well, which was the serve and the forehand for like the last couple of years, but then she has so many other strengths, like athletically, that just make her like a nightmare when those two shots are really clicking. Um, and I don't think she's going to feel the kind of pressure that she did, for instance, when she was defending the U.S. Open. And I completely agree. She's playing her best tennis. This is the best tennis I've ever seen her play, much more than even U.S. Open that she won in 2023. And
They
now,
have
because now she's actually had a coach come in and address those technical things, whereas Brad didn't really do that. So
They have, of course, played a Grand Slam final before at the French Open. Very different moment, very different conditions, certainly much more favourable for Iga. Just one final question, Vanch. If Iga Swiatek was in that final against, let's say, Coco, as that's what you've gone for, what would you be saying to her? Or what do you imagine Wim Fissette might be saying to her as a sort of possible way of beating Coco and taking that first Australian Open title?
yeah, it's tough. I don't know if I would change too much, other than just like, I mean, there was like just a hyper intensity about Ego that was there like at the United Cup, because I think she just wanted to win so badly for Poland, just get over that hump and win something big for her country. And I also wonder if the fatigue from the other matches caught up to her, because I actually thought there was a 3 or 4 game spell where Iga played really well in the second set, and she was also up a break in the first. So there actually wasn't that much separating them. It was two of the best movers against each other, trying to extract errors with really long physical, entertaining ball striking. So I mean, there's a few adjustments as well, like maybe on the return, where for instance, like Coco was really going after the Iga second serve, but Iga was having a little bit of a tougher time, in those forehand to forehand exchanges, or for instance, when she was coming forward. Maybe there's a couple of more cat and mouse things that they could try to just throw in just to throw Coco off guard. But I think for the most part, it's just going to be about maintaining that intensity and not putting too much pressure on herself, because I just think like mentally that was a tough task with her trying to get that win. And she was also the first singles match, so she wanted to get Poland off to a 1-0 start, and I think maybe some of the team stuff played into it as well.
Sure. I actually do have a final question. I've teased you and tricked you a little bit, actually. I have a question for you now, Vanch. What would it mean for Iga's legacy and the whole sort of tennis history if she was to take this Australian Open?
I think it would be huge, because now you're 3/4 of the way to the calendar slam. You've more or less answered all the questions and doubts that people have been saying about you in the slams outside of Roland Garros for the last 2 or 3 years. You've now most likely beaten one of your bigger rivals, Coco and Arena, and now you're back at number one. Plus you have the clay court swing coming up after this, where you're probably going to do really well. So it's like it takes some of the pressure off as well for defending all the points that she has coming up after this. And then just also the slam count, like winning 6 slams by the age of what? I mean, she will be 24, I guess, this year. So 23, 6 slams at 23 is pretty rare company.
Fair enough. I think I would agree with all that. I think a Wimbledon title as well would be helpful, but let's not get greedy for now. All right,
Yeah.
Vanch, big thanks for joining me today, and we'll catch up very soon, of course, as we continue with the Australian Open. And do let me know in the comments section below whether you agree with Vanch and our paths to potential glory, also whether you agree or disagree with our eventualities in terms of both of us thinking that Iga will just fall short. And of course, check out Vanch on Twitter, but also check out the Iga and Carlos Tennis Show on all your podcast areas, plus on YouTube now, as well as, of course, X or Twitter, whichever you prefer to call it. Big thanks, Vanch, and I'll catch up with you soon.
Yep. Thank you, John.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on all things tennis.